What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to Not Your Average Meta, an MTG Commander channel dedicated to bringing you decks and commanders you wouldn't normally find in your average meta. This week's video is brought to you by our new channel sponsor, International MTG. If you're looking for competitive pricing on your favorite MTG cards old and new, be sure to check out the International MTG store and TCG Player, link in the description of this video. This week on Not Your Average Meta, we have the second of 3 games we filmed a week ago down at the Hobby Horse in Taylorville, Illinois. First, we have Patrick bringing his Jeskai spell-slinging dinosaur to the table, Kalamax's Stormsire. This deck looks to cast and copy a bunch of powerful spells in order to take all his opponents out of the game. Next, we have Gavin playing his mono-white deck being led by Odric, Lunarch Marshal. This is a word soup deck which looks to cast a bunch of creatures with different abilities in order to pump up his team using his commander's word share ability so he can eventually smash in his opponent's face through combat damage. Then we have Justin playing the Mimeoplasm. This is his classic Mimeo deck that looks to dump a lot of big creatures into his graveyard so his commander has plenty of scary targets to copy when he comes into play. Finally, we have Fall playing Falco Spara the Pactweaver, which is actually a shared deck with his other commander, Galia, Kindler of Hope. This is a Voltron deck that is looking to cast a bunch of ores and equipment from the top of his library in order to make his commander huge so he can kill his opponents with commander damage. Now that we're fighters, let's step into the Thunderdome and see which deck will come out on top. Turn 1, Patrick plays a Forest and pays 1 for a turn 1 Soul Ring. He then uses the Soul Ring to cast a pair of Lightning Greaves. Gavin draws and plays a Plains Return, and not to be outdone, he also plays a turn 1 Soul Ring. Justin draws and plays a Sad Swamp before passing. Falco draws and plays a tapped Canopy Vista, passing turn. Patrick draws and plays a tapped Rugged Highlands, gaining a life. Gavin draws and plays another Plains before tapping out to cast his commander, Odric, Lunarch Marshal. Justin draws for turn and plays an island before passing. Falco draws for turn and plays a Windswept Heath, paying the 1 life to sacrifice it, and goes to get a Spara's headquarters, putting it into play tapped. Patrick draws and taps out to cast Journey to the Oracle. He then dumps out the remaining lands in his hand before passing turn. Gavin draws for turn and plays another Plains before paying 2 for a Thought Vessel. Gavin then pays another 2 to cast Sungrave's Pegasus before going to combat. He then swings his commander Patrick for 3 damage while he gains 3 life. Justin draws and plays a Lonar Waste as his lane for turn. Falco draws and plays an untapped Dreamroot Cascade for turn, before paying 2 for a Growth Spiral. He then draws a card and plays a Breeding Pool, paying the 2 life to bring it into play untapped. He then casts his own Soul Ring and passes turn. Patrick draws for turn and plays another Mountain and passes. Gavin draws for turn and plays another Plains. He then taps 5 to cast an Angel of Intervention, and then goes to combat, triggering his commander, giving his creatures lifelink, flying, and vigilance. He then swings Odric at Fog and his Pegasus at Justin. Nobody declares blocks, and Gavin gains 6 life. Justin draws and plays another Swamp before paying 4 to cast Mortal Combat. Fog draws for turn and then plays a Field of the Dead before he pays 4 to cast his commander, Falco Spara. He then enters with a shield counter on him. He then pays 2 for a Paradise Druid and passes turn. Patrick draws for turn and then plays a Mountain and yet again passes. Gavin draws for turn and plays another Plains. He then pays 3 for Mirage Mirror. He then pays 3 for Danithic Compassion and goes to combat. This then triggers his commander, giving his creatures lifelink, flying, first strike, and vigilance. Gavin then swings his commander at Fog, his Pegasus at Patrick, and his Angel at Justin. Nobody declares blocks and they all take their damage while Gavin gains 10 life. Justin draws for turn and plays another island. He then taps out to cast Gravebreaker Lamia, going to find a card to put into his graveyard while he passes. Fog draws for turn and pays to exile Sparta's Adjudicators, turning his Field of Ruins into a Bant Tri-land. Fog then plays Halberd Depths as his land for turn and looks at the top 3 cards of his library. He then taps out to cast Sigil of the Empty Throne before looking at the top card of his library. He then removes the shield counter from his commander and pays the 1 to cast Soothsaying off the top of his library, which creates an angel token. Patrick draws for turn and passes. Gavin draws for turn and then uses his Soul Ring to turn his mirror into a copy of Fog's commander. He then goes to combat, which triggers his commander, giving all of his creatures lifelink, flying, first strike, trample, and vigilance. Gavin then swings his mirror and commander Patrick while he swings his Angel and Pegasus at Justin. Nobody blocks and they all take their damage while Gavin gains another 15 life. Justin draws for turn and pays 3 to cast 3 visits, going to get a Forest from his library to put it into play. Fog draws for turn and pays 5 to cast Mirari's Wake. This then creates another Angel token. He then pays 2 to cast and enchant his commander with Canopy Cover, which creates another Angel token, and he passes. Patrick draws again and passes. Gavin draws and pays 3 for a Crystalline Giant. He then goes to combat and rolls for his Giant, which gives him a Menace counter. Gavin then pays to turn his mirror into Falco Spara. He then swings his mirror at Fog, who doesn't block, and he gains 5 life. Justin draws and plays a Yavimaya Coast as a land for turn. He then taps out to cast Cragplate Baloth and passes. At the end of his turn, Fog uses Soothsaying to look at the top 5 cards of his library and rearrange them. Fog then draws for turn to cast Indomitable Might, targeting his commander, which creates another Angel token. He then casts Swords to Plowshares on Gavin's Angel, exiling it, while Gavin gains another 4 life. Fog then goes to combat and swings his commander Gavin, who doesn't block and takes a 7 commander damage. Patrick draws for turn, then pays 5 to cast Double Vision before passing his turn. Gavin draws and turns his mirror into an angel before going to combat, triggering his commander, giving his creatures lifelink, flying, first strike, menace, and vigilance. He then swings his mirror, Pegasus, and Daneth at Fog. Fog then double blocks Daneth and the Pegasus with his angels, sending them to the graveyard. He then takes the remaining 4 damage while Gavin gains 4 life. Gavin then pays 6 to cast Sun Titan and chooses to return Daneth back to play from his graveyard. Justin draws for turn and pays 2 to cast Search for Escanta before passing. Fog draws for turn and pays 2 to enchant his commander with Rune of Sustenance, which then creates an Angel token. Then with the draw trigger on the stack, Fog puts his 2 floating mana into Soothsaying to rearrange his top 2 cards of his library. He then draws before paying 1 for Basilisk Collar, which he then equips to his commander. Fog then goes to combat yet again, swinging his commander Gavin for 7 damage while he gains 7 life. Patrick draws and finally hits a blue mana source, playing a tapped Swiftwater Cliffs, gaining life when it enters. Gavin draws for turn and then pays 1 for Legion's Landing, which creates a white vampire token with lifelink. He then casts a Stone Coil Serpent for 2 and goes to combat, rolling for his giant, landing on Death Touch. This then triggers his commander, giving his creatures lifelink, flying, first strike, menace, reach, Death Touch, and vigilance. He then swings his Titan at Patrick, who doesn't block, which then returns his Pegasus back to play while he gains 6 life. On his upkeep, Justin looks at the top card of his library and puts it into his graveyard and then draws for turn. He then pays to cast his commander the Mimeoplasm, making him a copy of Jin-Gitaxias with an additional +6/+6 counters. On his end step, he draws 7 cards while Fog activates Soothsaying for 4. Fog then draws for turn and then pays 4 to cast Sage's Reverie, which has him drawing 4 cards and creating another Angel token. He then casts an Arcane Signet for 2, and a Helm of the Gods for 1, which he then equips to his commander. Fog then goes to combat and swings his commander Justin for 18 commander damage and gains 18 life. He then pays 3 to cast Fair's Protection, and in response, Patrick casts Dualcaster Mage to copy the protection spell. Gavin draws for turn and then passes. On his upkeep, Justin looks at the top card of his library and puts it into his graveyard, and then he draws for turn. He then plays another forest for turn before paying 4 to cast a Questing Beast. Fog and Patrick then phase back in, and on his upkeep, Fog pays to look at and rearrange the top 7 cards of his library. He then draws for turn to cast Elvish Visionary, drawing her card when she enters. Fog then pays 5 to cast Finest Hour, creating an Angel token. Fog then goes to combat, swinging at Justin, taking him out of the game with commander damage. He then goes to his second combat step and swings at Patrick, also taking him out with commander damage while he gains more life. Gavin draws for turn and pays 4 for a Well of Lost Dreams. He then goes to combat and rolls for his giant, which gives him a +1/+1 counter. This then triggers his commander, giving his creatures lifelink, flying, first strike, menace, reach, death touch, and vigilance. Gavin then swings out at Fog, and before blockers are declared, he casts Swords to Plowshares to exile an Angel token. Fog then declares he's only blocking the Pegasus and takes the rest of the 20 damage, while Gavin gains 20 more life. At the end of his turn, Fog pays to rearrange the top 3 cards of his library. Fog untaps for turn, and before his draw step, he pays 5 to use Soothsaying in order to shuffle his library. He then pays an additional 4 to rearrange the top 4 cards. Fog then draws for turn and goes straight to combat, attacking Gavin. Gavin then blocks with his 1/1 first strike Death Touch Vampire token, but in response, Fog casts Heroic Intervention to make his creature indestructible, sealing himself the win.
Alright, so we have Fog Raw with another win. Playing as the Degenerate decks. How does it feel to win again?
Feels pretty good to pick up another win, you know. Haters are going to say it's fake, But at this point, it's about the same as walking or breathing. It just comes naturally. But we'll see you next time for another great win. Thanks. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you can see more games and decks you wouldn't normally see in your average meta.